Dark Winter Nights is produced with support from the University of Alaska Fairbanks Journalism Department. UAF Journalism. Tell great stories.
Welcome to Dark Winter Nights, broadcasting live on KUAC from Herring Auditorium in Fairbanks, Alaska. My name is Rob Prince. I'm chair of the journalism department at UAF and your host for an incredible night of true stories from Alaska. Our band tonight is Thought Trade with Emily Anderson. I'd like to thank my employer, the University of Alaska Fairbanks College of Liberal Arts Journalism Department, as well as Geek City Electronics, Alaska Universal Productions, Forethought Carpentry, LLC, and Pike's Waterfront Lodge for their support of this event. Our first storyteller tonight came to Alaska to take advantage of everything this great state had to offer. Unfortunately, it had a little bit more to offer than he and his friends were ready for. Please welcome Chris Zwolinski with a story we call How to Use a Life Jacket.
There were three of us, Mark and Eldon, who are brothers, and myself. Not one of us had any whitewater rafting experience. I mean, it's something we wanted to do. We watched it on TV. We'd seen the magazines. But the only rafting that we did was floating on the Chena River through town. And the only whitewater we'd see is if a power boat went too fast next to us. One day, Eldon bought a new raft at a garage sale. It was about 10 feet long, yellow. It was rubberized canvas, and it was a six-man raft. It said right on it in block letters, six-man raft. And it had like a clothesline around the outside of it attached, and for carrying it or towing it. I don't know. We weren't rafters. So Mark and Eldon had been down at Chitna fishing, and it had been raining a lot, and on their way home, where the Delta River parallels the highway, they were paying close attention to it, and they thought, God, that looks neat, that looks great. So when they arrived back in Fairbanks, they informed me that we were going whitewater rafting on the Delta River, to which I replied, that's great, let's go, I'm in. Where's the Delta? I did a little research since then, and I've learned that the point where we got into the river is where the book says that inexperienced rafters, that would be us, this is where they generally get out after rafting the upper stretch, which is more placid. So we put into the river. It's a gorgeous sunny day. It's beautiful, blue sky in the middle of the mountains. I mean, this is fantastic. We're enjoying it. Do it for about an hour until the river channels up. It's getting a little faster. The water's getting a little bit gray. There's a lot of glacial creeks coming in, and it's from the creeks from the glaciers, and it's getting a little faster, a little colder. Okay, I don't know who did it first, but one of us took off their life preserver and put it underneath their knees to insulate against that cold floor. And the rest of us thought, the other two of us thought, well, that's a good idea. It's much more comfortable. So, and besides, we're going to put the life preservers back on when we need them. I mean, that only makes sense. So, again, it's a gorgeous day. We're in the mountains. We're just loving it, just digging it. We're going down the river. And another hour, this or so, and we see our first standing wave. And this is going to be exciting. And we paddle up toward it. We're aiming right on it. We line up, and we hit that wave straight on, and we just float right over the top. It was so anticlimactic. But not to worry, there was another one off to the left. So we paddle over to the one on the left, and we hit that one straight on as well, and we just kind of float over it. It was like, it got to be like a pinball where we'd go to the left and paddle to the right and over to the left. And we were enjoying it. And with each wave, some were a little stronger than others, but the raft was taking it well. And we thought we're gaining experience. We're definitely getting more confident at this. And this goes on for about an hour. Well, the river eventually starts tightening up and channeling up, and we're not having to go to the left and the right so much anymore. And the river's pretty much taking us where it wants to take us, right down the center. And we're going roller after roller, and the water's splashing, and we're getting our money's worth here. This is good. So we hit a series of waves, and a little more than what we bargained for. There was a hole at the end of it. The raft went in, and it flipped end for end, upside down, tossed us out. We're out of the water. When I came up, I was underneath the raft. I went back down, came back up, and I grabbed a hold of the outside of the rope as the string, the clothesline, as Eldon and Mark were. I suppose if we had any experience, the hydraulic was kind of keeping us in place. And if we had any experience, maybe we could have held the raft, flipped it, and climbed back in. But we have no experience. Our instinct said, get out of there. This is dangerous. So we pushed off and immediately got sucked down under the next wave. So we're holding on. We get back up, and we come out of the water, and we're spitting and coughing. And what we learned to do was scout ahead, look ahead, and when we saw waves coming, we would take a breath of air before the hydraulic would suck us down, which it did every single time. So this got to be a sequence after sequence, just seeing the water getting sucked underneath and coughing, spitting, and popping back up. This went on for, I'm guessing, a couple of minutes. Then the water flattened out. It's still moving fast, but we see a gravel bar off to the right. And we start stroking and kicking with everything we had to the gravel bar, hoping that we could make it. And we did. We touched ground. I have my feet firmly in the gravel. Mark's got his feet in the gravel. Eldon's feet are tangled up in the rope with the bow line. I didn't even know the raft. I didn't know it had a bow. But his legs are wrapped in. He has no control. He can't get his legs into the gravel. I'm holding on. Mark's holding on. We're pulling with everything we have. I was almost up to my waist out of the water. I guess, I mean, it's hindsight, but I guess I could have let go. And you know, the thought never occurred to me. It never occurred to just get out of the water. I held on, and the raft and Eldon sucked Mark and I back in, and we were back in the channel, back into the routine, which we knew well, which was get a breath of air, get sucked underneath, and get ready for the next wave. Now, a couple more waves, and I realize I've still got a paddle in my hand. I didn't even realize it. Mark's got a paddle in his hand. Eldon doesn't, but we've got paddles. We didn't even know it. As soon as I realized, I even thought about the fact that I'm holding a paddle, we had another particularly violent wave, and it pulled us down hard. It ripped the paddle out of my hand. When I came back up, Mark wasn't there. And I looked at Eldon, and he's looking for his brother, and he's not there. And we didn't know what to think. We looked at each other for a while, and we didn't know what to say. We hit another hydraulic, and it sucked us down again. We came back up, and we heard a voice, and it was Mark. And he'd worked himself to the other side of the raft. What we didn't realize was he had a plan. What he did was he had taken his paddle and he flipped it over the upside-down raft, and he yelled at his brother to grab a hold of it. We're getting pretty numb. We don't have a whole lot of grip. Eldon tried to hold on to it. It took a couple of attempts, but he did. He managed to hold on to it for a while, and Mark used the paddle to pull himself up on top of the upside-down raft. And then he hauled his brother up, and then they hauled me on top. So we're pretty excited. We're not exactly high-fiving here. We're not, but we think we're going to make it. So we're paddling, trying to make it to shore. The current shoved us over to the right to a cut bank where it's rocky, and we bounced off and back into the channel, and then we realized that we're sinking. And what had happened was one of the rocks on that cut bank had sliced a hole into the raft. And this is another thing we're kind of learning as we go. I didn't know that the raft had two chambers, a left and a right. I don't know which one we were left with, but now the three of us are riding a sausage. And so we've got we're on this thing, we're riding this thing. I happen to be in the front, and we can see the Black Rapids River up ahead of us. And we don't think we're going to make it for what it entails after the junction of the two rivers. So we're paddling, we're trying to hold on to the sausage and trying to paddle with everything we have. Mark had given me the paddle since I was in front, hoping to steer it better. And when I see we don't know if we're going to make it, I yell at him to hold on to me. I'm going to let go and just use both hands. He told me later that with every stroke that I did, the front of the sausage would come up in the air and go back down and come up in the air and bounce back down again. And there was an eddy we were trying to hit, and we were pulling with everything we had, and we didn't make it. And then it was like the countdown to 150 feet, 100 feet, 75 feet. And I'd say it was about 15 feet before the rivers joined. My paddle hit gravel, hit rock, and I jumped out, grabbed a rock, had the front of the sausage. It pivoted around. Mark jumped out and was able to grab his brother, and we dragged ourselves up on shore, which was pretty relieving, except for the fact that we're on the wrong shore. We're on the shore opposite side of the highway. Now, so we're right across now from that pull-off that I told you about, that where we first inspected the rivers. And at that pull-off is a young couple, and so in my imagination, this is just my imagination, some guy's got his heartthrob out for a Sunday drive, and they pull off the road, look at the river and the glacier, Black Rapids Glacier, and the mountains, and they kind of looked up river like, whoa, what's that? And which is sausage coming down, which is us, and they've probably never seen anybody rafting that way, and hopefully don't ever again. And so they watched us drag up onto the shore, and they were trying to yell to us back and forth, and the idea is if we're okay. But they went up about a mile or 2 miles up is what was at the time known as the Black Rapids Mountain Training Center, military, and they went up there to try to get help. It was about 3 hours before anybody arrived, and 3 soldiers did arrive, and they were attempting to rescue us. So what they had with them was a raft about half the size of ours and a fishing rod. Now, they're trying to communicate with us, and we're kind of, it's like 2 mimes across the river with each other trying to communicate and get an idea of what's going to happen. But eventually with the idea that they gave us, that they were trying to get across to us, was they were going to cast the fishing rod a lead weight across, and we would hold on to the line and pull a rope across. And once the rope was across both sides of the river, they would ferry the raft back and forth and get us back on their side of the river. And but when we got a hold of the fishing line and they attached it to the rope, it would, as soon as that rope hit the current, it would snap the fishing line, and so it wasn't working. We made 3 attempts, but it didn't work. So they left, and we honestly didn't know what was going to happen at that point. But the guys had a lighter, and they had taken it apart and dried it in the sun, and we had gotten a fire going by this time. I mean, hours have passed. But so we were warm, we were on land, and we were, as far as we were concerned, we were fine. Something is going to happen, and which something did happen. About 2 o'clock in the morning, it's the middle of summertime, so it's daylight, we hear a helicopter. It's a state trooper helicopter. It lands, the co-pilot jumps out, and he ushers us in without saying anything. He ushers us inside, we grab what's left of our raft, toss it in, and it takes off and starts heading north. And the 3 of us are kind of looking at each other like, truck's back there. And but nobody's saying anything, so I leaned up to the co-pilot, and it's hard to hear. We don't have headsets, they do, and I was yelling at not yelling at, but toward the co-pilot that we've got a truck back there, and I didn't see it, but I'm sure he rolled his eyes, and I could see him talking to the pilot to the left seat, and that this huge machine just kind of arced around, swung around to the south, and flew us right back to the truck and landed right next to it. It's like valet service. And we jumped out of the truck and out of the helicopter, and it's then when they the trooper took some information from us, and we got our names in the paper, and it's not exactly, I didn't even like getting my name in the paper if I scolded a goal in B-League hockey, but now I got my name for this. But so it was a pretty quiet ride back to Fairbanks. We weren't saying a whole lot, pretty dog-faced, and but I do remember thinking as we were driving along, I was thinking, I'm alive! This is great, I'm an idiot, but I'm alive! I'm sure you're thinking that the raft never saw water again, but it did. The very next summer, I patched a hole in it, and I pumped it up, and my parents had given me some baby ducks. I filled the raft up full of water and used it as a duck pond. Thank you.
Chris Zwolinski. Please welcome Sophie Henry with a story we call Tongue-Tied.
So one cold winter day, I was at preschool and it was time for recess. So I went out to recess and I played with my friends for a little while. And after I did that, I saw a metal pole sticking out of the ground. Now, I was only 3 or 4, so I wasn't super smart. And I thought, I wonder how that pole tastes. So I walked up to the pole and literally stuck my tongue onto it. Now, the pole was cold, so I tried to take my head off of it, but my tongue was stuck to the pole. And so I tried to call some of my friends over to help me get my tongue off the pole, so like this. Help, my tongue stuck to a pole, come help me. But my friend didn't notice because she was playing with someone. And even if she did notice, I was talking kind of funny, so she probably wouldn't have understood me. So finally recess was over and everyone started heading inside, and in my head I was like, really guys, you're leaving me out here with my tongue stuck to a pole? So everyone went inside and I kept going, waving my arms like this, hoping someone would notice me. And finally a girl noticed me and she told the teacher. So the teacher came out with a cup of warm water and poured it on my tongue, and my tongue got freed. So that day I went home and I looked at my tongue, and part of it was kind of like peeled off and bloody and hurt a little bit, but after a few days it went away. And the lesson I learned from that was not to stick your tongue to a pole in the winter. Thank you.
Sophie Henry. Please welcome Heather Penn.
So it was a Thursday, and my husband has decided that it's time the family starts going hunting with him. He goes by himself or his friend every year, and our oldest son. So now he decides it's time for us to start going. So my oldest was working, so we took my 14-year-old daughter and my 12-year-old son. And Thursday we decided to leave, and initially the plan was we would go out Thursday night, and I would come back Monday with my son, and he would stay out for 10 days. So we went out there, we packed up and pulled the kids out of school, dropped the little ones off at Grandma's, and headed on out. I'm not allowed to disclose the exact location because my husband says it's top secret. So we went pretty far out, about 2.5 hours outside of town and to a trailhead, and got on the four-wheelers and headed about 14 miles in to our campsite. And it was pretty uneventful I led the way, and he followed with the trailer, and the kids were in between us. And we went through 2 small creeks that were not too deep, about maybe a foot deep and maybe about 6 feet wide, and about 8 feet wide the other one. So there was no real issues. There was a huge hill that we told the kids to be super careful on, because it's a slate hill and you'll slide down it if you're not careful. So we drove in there, set up camp, and started hunting. So Friday night was great, and we had good weather, and we're sitting there, and my husband drops the bomb on me when I say, hey, when we go out Monday, are you guys gonna, stay for a little while and help us tie everything down? And he's like, oh, no, you're going by yourself. Just you and Gage are going out, my 12-year-old son. So you're not going with me? He said, no, you got this. You're all right. So I said, okay. So I spent 2 days pretty mad at him for telling me that wasn't part of the plan, I thought. So we hunted for a while, and then come Sunday, I decided, well, he's pretty serious about this, so obviously I'm going to be doing this on my own. So my son and I said, Sunday, I said, all right, let's get ourselves psyched up here to go, because it's just going to be us. So Monday morning, we packed up our stuff, and him and I said goodbye to Dad and sister, and we headed out. And we made it about 10 miles, pretty uneventful, no real issues, until we came to the first creek, which was technically the second creek on the way in, and it was quite a bit higher than it was the first time we went through it. And I said, well, it's not that far across, we got this. So we floored it through it, and it pushed us a little bit, but we both made it across. So then we kept on going, and we went down to the next creek, which really wasn't a creek anymore. And I looked at it, and we pulled up, and I looked at my son, and I'm like, what do you think? He's like, well, it's a little bigger. Yeah, but it's wide, right? It's not deep, it's just wide. He's like, yeah. So we stuck a stick in it, and we got this. So I started to go in, and I drove the four-wheeler in a little bit, and the next thing you know, I can feel the front end start to float a little bit, and in true Alaskan tradition, if you when in doubt, gas it out. So I floored it, and the four-wheeler went about another 6 inches before it got sucked up by the river. So I bobbed on it for a little while, and then it flipped me off and threw me into the drink and took the four-wheeler down the river. So I swam to the other side and pulled myself out, soaking wet, and my son's now trapped on one side of the river, and I'm trapped on the other. There was no way across. So I said, okay, so I'm thinking, what do I do? What do I do? And I said, I remember at the top of the very steep hill, there was a camp there. I said, so stay there, don't make any noise, and I'm going to go climb the hill and see if the camp is there. So we stayed there, and he was quiet, and I climbed. It took me about 45 minutes, because I'm not in the best of physical condition. Got to the top, and the camp was gone. So I stood where the camp was, and I cried. What do I do? What do I do now? So I'm like, well, maybe there is a little bit higher of a peak. Maybe at the top of that peak, there will be a camp, because there's a campsite. So I climbed to the top of the very tippy top of the peak and stood there. There was no camp. They were gone as well. So I stood in that spot and cried. And I said, now what do I do? So then I had to make the choice. It was about 3 miles to the road in the middle of nowhere in our undisclosed location, hoping that I could find somebody. And of course, you'd heard the stories about places way out that didn't like people. And I thought maybe I'd get murdered if I went out there. So I thought maybe that's not the best idea if I don't get murdered or eaten by something in the way out there. So I decided, of course, I can't leave my kid. So I traipsed back down the hill, and about 3/4 of the way down, there was an old, probably 1970s snow machine sitting there with an old rope around it. And I said, well, maybe if I salvage this rope, I can use this rope to get back across the river. So I'm almost down the hill, and I can hear my son yelling, Mom! Mom! Like, oh my God, he's gonna make a bear come. So I start running towards him, and I'm like, I'm right here, I'm right here. He's like, you were gone forever. I thought you died. I'm like, okay, I had to climb the hill. So I've got the rope, and I'm looking, and he's probably about 30 feet away from me across the river. And I said, all right, here's the plan. I'm gonna tie the rope to myself. You're gonna tie it to the four-wheeler, and you're gonna gun it and drag me across the river. And he looks at me, and he's like, really? What if the rope falls off? I'm like, well, I don't know. He's like, I'm not doing that. I said, okay. All right, so shimmy up the tree. You're going to tie it to the top of the tree, and I'm going to Tarzan across. He's like, I'm not climbing the tree. I don't want to climb the tree. I'm like, oh my God, how am I going to get across? So off to my left, there was a log that had fallen across the river, and the bottom part of it was submerged in the river, but it was the only way to get across. The four-wheeler was gone. So I said, so you're going to crawl across the log to me, and together we'll go find help. So he walks over to the log, and he looks at it, and says, I'm not climbing across the log. I said, well, your side's big. You've got the big side. Just crawl across, and then when you get close, I'll just rip you over. I'm not crawling across the log. So I said, okay, I guess I'm crawling across the log. So I traipsed through the river, and it was probably about waist deep, traipsed through, got over as close as I could, and climbed up on a grass berm, put my hands on the log. I said, all right, I'm going to cross the log. So I crossed over, and the entire time I was crossing the log, if anybody has kids, the movie Horton Hears a Who, I just kept going, I'm as light as a feather, I'm as light as a feather, all the way till I got to the other side. And I made it. I got over there, and I gave my son a hug, and I said, all right, let's try to lasso the four-wheeler so we can at least get the gun. So the four-wheeler's bobbing in this kind of little knoll over area that's full of water. And we spent 20 minutes or so lassoing it, couldn't get it. And I said, this day can't get any worse. And as if on cue, it starts pouring. Really? Like, how many more things can go wrong? So I climb back, we go back over, and I said, all right, let's take your four-wheeler and go back. I said, we've got 14 miles back to Dad. I said, at least then we know there's people there, we're safe. So we got back on the four-wheeler and discovered his winch was broken. So I'm like, okay, well, I guess we just can't ever get stuck. We make it the 14 miles back in, and I can see my husband and my daughter in the distance with their binoculars and scopes looking for moose, kind of looking, heads cocked, like, what's going on? So we pull up, they're sitting up on a hill looking, and we pull up and kind of drive past them a little bit, and he walks over, and I get off the four-wheeler, and he goes, what the hell? What are you doing? I said, well, I've had the worst day ever, and I just started bawling. So he let me cry for a little while, but I knew he was really wanting to know where the other four-wheeler was. He didn't really care that I was all right. So he looks at me, and he's like, all right, all right. Where's the four-wheeler? It's in the river. And he's like, what river? There's a river. So I don't think he believed me so much, but it was already late, and we broke down, and we wound up staying there that night. And of course, the next morning, he had to cut his moose hunting trip short, break everything down, and come with us to the supposed river. So on the way there, we ran into another guy that was camped there, and he was like, well, let me see this river that you fell in. So he came with us, and sure enough, we got down there, and the river, the first river that we had went through, was now impassable. So it was only about 6 feet across, but you couldn't get through it. It was completely full. So we cut a trail around that and went to the part where I fell in. So we go up to there, and my husband looks and pull up to it. We're all kind of surrounding the river, and he gets off his four-wheeler, looks at it, and he goes, that's a river. I told you it was a river. Why would you drive through that? It's a river. I don't know. It just seemed like a good idea at the time. I wanted to go home. And he's like, I can't believe you did that. So, long story short, we wound up having to set up camp. We were stranded there, and it was an island, so it became stuck between two rivers now. So we wound up setting up camp, and we were stuck there for an additional about 7 days. And in that time, we met some people. We were stranded with 7 other families because they would come down, get stuck, and couldn't leave. There was no way out. So we made some new friends. We made some friends. Sarah, Gabe, and Izzy were our new friends, and we were slowly running out of food and rations and started eating the moose that people had killed. We didn't get a moose, but we started eating the other people's moose. And it was an interesting time. But we made people, and then eventually we wound up being able to, the river, we watched the river every day, and for a while it got higher, and then a while it got lower. And one of the guys that had come down there had been quite a bit further out than us and had killed a moose, or a wolf, which he said was the alpha male. Well, he hadn't wrapped it properly and had drug the scent of the wolf down to our site. So once that guy came in, for the next 3 days, we were surrounded by a wolf pack. And when you'd wake up in the morning and look out the door, you see padded little wolf feet, and you'd hear them howling at all hours. So this was a great addition to our club, I must say. So eventually we wound up being able to get out, and I had to crawl. These guys came down, military guys came down, and they wanted to get across the river because their dad was trapped on the other side. And we wound up being able to crawl back across the stupid log, my son and I, and they took us out to our car. So we wound up going out to our car, go back into Fairbanks, and round up my oldest son and 2 more four-wheelers to go try to help my family back out and bring some rations in. So we go down there, capes flying, we're there to save the day, and they're already across the river. Great. So we did nothing. So we wound up spending our last night there and not getting a moose and heading back to the car. So when we got out, it was my father's birthday when we got out, and I called him, and I told him what happened, and he was super mad. He's like, I can't believe you would do that. I can't believe you would put yourself in that situation. And then once he finally calmed down, he was like, that's a great story. You should tell that story. And the words of my father, he says, the Irish people, they spin a good yarn. A week after I talked to my dad, he passed away. So I tell this story to honor my dad. I love him. Thank you.
Heather Penn. Please welcome our next Iditarod champion, Brent Sass, with his retired dog, Silver.
Now I got to live up to that one, huh, Rob? All right, well, we're going to give it our best go. The story tonight, it's an amazing story. I feel like it is something that sort of epitomizes my entire career. When I first got into dog mushing, I really just wanted to be out in the woods. I used the dogs to travel, go caribou hunting, and Silver and I learned together to just go do things and not have any fear about doing it. And he was my best role model out there on the trail. And so we ran 3 Yukon quests, and I was really broke, and I didn't have any money, and I was wondering how I was going to actually get it together to continue racing. And I figured the best way to do this is to figure out a way to make money with dogs, right? So we had been traveling, I say we, me and all my friends have been traveling with the dogs in the wilderness for the last 4 or 5 years, 6 years, gained a lot of confidence and decided that guiding was maybe the next step. Like that was the next place to go and give it a shot and maybe make a little bit of money in the process and have fun. That was my main goal. Was I didn't want to go get a job. Jobs are terrible. So I just decided that, we would start searching around. And through a lot of other circumstances, I got an opportunity to throw my hat in the ring to guide a Norwegian dog mushing school, a school of kids from Norway that wanted to come over and have an adventure in Alaska. And this Norwegian guy was going to come and visit me at my kennel and sort of interview for the job. He shows up, and I pull out a map on the hood of my truck, and I'm like, yeah, we're going to go here. We can just, this trail here will be great. There's no trail there, but we'll put the trail in. And I'm talking about the middle of the Brooks Range now, like where people don't go. I have a good buddy who has a lodge out there, and we were going to go there, mush and ski jor in. I had this grand plan that 6 people would mush, or 7 people would ski jor, 7 people would mush, and I created this big plan in my head and sold it to him, and thinking this is just going to get my foot in the door. There's no way this guy is going to choose me. I mean, I don't have any credentials other than I've run the quest a few times. He takes off, and 2 weeks later I get an email from him, and he's like, we want you to do the expedition. And I'm like, huh? Oh, okay. I guess we got to start figuring out how to make this happen now, So fast forward 7 months, and I've run another Yukon quest. Good boy. Get comfortable, Silver. And I've run another Yukon quest, and I've somehow put together the logistics thanks to some amazing friends and the crew of people that I had to help me make it all happen. There's a whole other story. We put the trail in, we cached food the whole way through overflow and epicness with snow machines like 3-4 days earlier, and we didn't get in our heads that we just had a really hard time getting in with snow machines through really deep overflow, and we were like, let's go dog mushing with kids in the middle of nowhere. And that was our attitude, and you couldn't have told us differently. And so we took the chance, we took the risk earlier on, and now it was time to show, to put the show on and make it happen. And so the trailhead, we're all lined up. We got 7 ski jors, 2 dogs per ski jor, backpacks on them. We've got 6 sleds. They got 4 to 5. Some have 6 dogs, depending on how big the kid was. Sleds that are sort of duct taped together in a lot of ways. Nothing matches. Everything is sort of just done, done the way we'd been doing it for the last 5 years. But now we have paying clients, and we're winging it, basically. We're winging it. But we have all the confidence in the world. So it comes down to the snow machine, and we got the snow machine, and we got a big Siglin trailer, a big flat bottom plastic sled. And it is packed like a block that's 8 feet long, 4 feet wide, and 4 feet high of stuff. And it weighs more than it should. And I look at it and I'm like, that's a problem, but it doesn't matter because we're going. And so we take off, and it's 30 miles the first day. We get in just to Bettles. We took off from the Hall Road. This is on our way in, it was no problem. It was a road. It was a plowed road, basically. So the first 30 miles went fairly smoothly. And we survived the first night. We get up, we get going down the trail, everything's going good. We get to the John River, and it's apparent that it's really overflowed. There's a lot of water on top. So we do some switching around. I get on a dog sled. I was driving the snow machine. I get on a dog sled. Tom and Josh go back. Josh goes back to drive the snow machine, and I take off to sort of break trail to make sure that we can get through. Silver in the lead. Always in the lead. And he, of course, no problem. Me and my 5 dogs I think I had, we blaze right through it. Everybody follows behind, ski joers dragging slush water coming up underneath, getting all their stuff completely soaked. I'm all happy because I'm in the front. I'm cruising right through it thanks to Silver. And all my dogs are really well trained to run through water, so I've got confidence in the fact that the dogs are just going to drag these people through, right? The hitch is we've got a freaking snow machine back there. I get there and I start triage, like immediately, build fires, get people warm, get people dried out, get tents set up. Like that's what my mindset is, all that. A few minutes later, Tom shows up and he's like kind of throwing his arms in the air and he's kind of upset and he walks over, he's like, "Where's your radio?" Because we had radios to communicate. And my radio was long gone dead, so I was out of touch with those guys. And he basically just, in not so many words, said that, we're screwed. Like this is bad. The snow machine is completely sunk into the river. It is in knee-deep water, up to thigh-deep water, and Josh is back there trying, but he's walking to stay warm. So the snow machine and all of that gear is sinking into the river. And so I looked at him and I said, "We need to get my 8 best dogs hooked up." And they were all over, because they were with the little teams. And so we assembled the 8 dogs, and I got on the back of the dog sled, and I remember turning them around and coming around and looking back at everything. And I just told Tom, I was just like, just keep everybody alive. Keep the home fires burning. That was my message to Tom. I just said, keep the home fires burning. We can do this. So I take off, and just that time, Josh comes around the corner, and he's walking, and he's frozen. He's been in the water. Both of these guys I've given it a valid attempt. They've been in water, up to their waist almost, trying to get the snow machine out, realizing it was a futile attempt. And so they started heading there, and Josh comes around the corner, and I remember to this day, and I know he does too, and I just looked at him and I said, "Positive attitude, dude. Positive attitude." We got this. As I mushed off into the distance, and through the water, and I've got 8 of my best dogs now, and in my head, my life basically depends on this. Like every ounce of who I am has to get that snow machine out. I have to put there's no option. I'm gonna solve this problem. So the whole way there, it's about a 3-mile trek through running water, water rushing over, ice breaking down, because we're kind of breaking down the trail as we're going back and forth. And I get there, and it's carnage. It is literally carnage. There is, if you can imagine, a snow machine sunk into the river up to its seat, a Siglin sled that's got that cord of wood on the back of it, sitting, in more than knee-deep water. I didn't think twice. I jumped in, and I started just disassembling everything, taking all the ratchet straps off, and throwing all the gear as far as I could. I get all the stuff piled up over there. I get the Siglin sled disconnected from the snow machine, and pull it out and pull it over to the dogs. The dogs have all been sitting there waiting patiently. 8 dogs looking at me going, "Just let us know when you need us, Dad. Just let us know when you need us." And so I hook the Siglin sled to the main line of the dogs. It runs underneath the sled. "Hey, Silver, stay here. I know it's getting old on you." Silver. Anyways, I hook the main line on. I load half the gear, probably 500 to 600 pounds of weight, onto that Siglin sled, and we take off. And we pull into camp, and I just tell these guys, let's unload this stuff as quickly as possible. It's sinking farther into the ice. So we dump all the gear off, and I tried to get the gear that they really needed, like our tent with a wood stove and some of the important things. The guides were the only ones that had a tent with a wood stove. Everybody else was like in these Norwegian tents. That Norwegians are tough people, let's just put it that way. And I'm very, very fortunate for that. So we're, I turn around. So I ask these dogs, I say, "Okay, guys, let's go." 8 dogs stand up. We loop them around, and we head right back into the fire, right back into the water. And they traipse right back through that 3 miles of total water at 40 below now. It's probably midnight. We get there. I take all the rest of the gear, load it on that Siglin sled, we immediately turn right back around and run right back over that 3 miles. It's getting worse. The water's getting deeper. It's running faster. And my headlights are dying like this. I've got 4 headlights attached to my head at this point, and they're all very, very dull, and I can barely see the leader. So I'm completely relying on Silver. Completely relying on him to hold the line out, to take us back. And not only that, it's like there's open leads happening. I don't know when I'm just going to fall in. And so I'm completely relying on Silver and the rest of these dogs to keep us going. And it's that bond and trust that I have with Silver that's just, it's amazing. And it's been such an awesome experience to have him part of my life. And in that moment, I know. Old news to him. I realized that, this is what it's all about. I'm like really living right now. And at that moment, I'm like getting myself really worked up. I'm crying out there probably like I'm going to start doing here in a little bit. And we get back there, we unload the stuff. They've got all the gear now there. All the kids have went to bed, but the mood was a little bit weird. Like Josh and Tom had done everything they possibly could, but there's 2 days into this expedition, and it's been kind of crazy. A little bit crazy, obviously. So I think a lot of them went to bed with like this, oh man, I don't know if this is going to happen, if this is going to finish. Maybe we're turning around tomorrow. There's major problems here. But that wasn't going to happen. I whipped the dog team around. We headed back again for a 3rd time. And we got back there, and I'm looking at this snow machine now. And I look at the dog team, and I'm like, we got to get this snow machine out, otherwise we're donating it to the John River, because it's going to be froze solid and in the bottom of the river by the morning. So I get the team turned around, and the snow machine is kind of like this down in the ice, and I'm able to maneuver it up and break a bunch of ice and get the machine so it's got a little bit of a ramp, and I tie the machine off with that rope that's from the main line of the dogs, and I jump in the water again. At this point, I am soaked to the bone from here down, completely soaked, froze completely solid as far as my pants. I'm warm because I got so much adrenaline rushing through me that it doesn't matter that I'm totally soaked. And I get in there, and I'm like, okay, guys, this is all happening. I'm talking to the dogs like, okay, guys, I went through, I gave everybody a good pet, and I said, all we got to do is all 9 of us got to be on the same wavelength for like 3 seconds. And if we can all pull all at the same time, we will get this snow machine out of here. I believe we will get this snow machine out of here. I'm having this pep talk out there at 40 below, in the middle of the John River, in the middle of the Brooks Range, knowing this is survival, this is my life kind of on the line. And I get in, and I start heaving on the back of that snow machine. I get it kind of loosened up, and and there's water rushing, and I'm like, all right, now! And I jerk up, and they pull forward, and it kind of moves a little bit, not much. And we do that for about 5 minutes. And finally, I was like, this is the one, guys. This is the one. And I heaved, and I jerked, and I said, all right, let's go. And they all hit the line, and the snow machine popped out of on top of the ice. And I'm like, go, 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 And they got it pulled up, so we, broke a bunch more ice, and they got it pulled up to the bank, or up to the nice hard ice. And it was like glorious. I think I was rolling around in the water at that point because we had the snow machine out. I knew it wasn't going to freeze in. I moved the Siglin sled over, and this is like Superman move at this point. I had no idea how I moved an Arctic Cat snow machine up on its side, put the Siglin sled underneath it, tipped the snow machine back on the Siglin sled, hooked the Siglin sled up, and said, let's go, guys. And we pulled the snow machine back to camp, the 3 miles on the Siglin sled, pulled it up on the bank, and everyone had went to bed except for Josh and Tom and the instructor. And I just told the instructor, I said, we'll get up tomorrow and we'll continue on down the trail. I'm not sure how that's going to happen yet, but we're going to do it. And so I have a couple things that I do for these moments that I have done ever since this day is I bring a Hawaiian shirt and Hawaiian shorts along on these trips. And so in the morning, I put on the Hawaiian shorts, I put on the Hawaiian shirt, and I walked out of the tent like nothing had even happened the night before. And I walked around, I checked in with all the kids and said, you guys ready for another day of mushing? And everyone was happy and excited. They were like, really, we're going forward? I was like, yeah, why wouldn't we go forward? They're looking at a frozen snow machine and everything, like a whole heap of frozen stuff. Well, what about oh, don't worry about that stuff. I'll deal with it. So they took off, Josh and Tom leading the way. We got all the teams out. We had to switch a bunch of stuff around because I needed a couple more dogs. And it's a long story from then on out, but we made it to the lodge 4 days. These guys would guide the kids, do all the work basically, and I hooked that snow machine sled with everything. I culled everything I possibly could, so now it was maybe a half a cord of wood on the back of this Siglin sled. And with 7 dogs, I pushed the sled all day long. I'd get into camp about 3 hours behind everybody, completely exhausted, ready to fall over dead. And then we'd have everything for the camp. The next day we'd get up, everyone would leave. I'd sit there and go, here we go again, and then I'd do it again. And we made it to the lodge, and by the time we got to the lodge, we were dialed, we were using stuff up as we went. It was no problem. We got to the lodge, spirits were high. You could just see in the kids' eyes that they had seen the light. They had seen something that they hadn't never seen before, and they probably hoped they'd never seen it again. But we turned around, we mushed back, we got back home, and I got an email from the instructor. I was really scared. I had really put a lot of people, I put a lot of people out there, and I was a little worried about what the reaction would be. And he emailed me, and he said that you had changed the lives of 14 kids, and that there's no better experience you could have ever given them. That was 7 years ago. Since then, I've guided over 100 kids on that expedition. We've went around to different parts of the state with them. We go to the Arctic now. Josh and Tom are still my right-hand men. I couldn't do it without them. And these dogs, it really all boils back down to the dogs. The connection and bond that we have, has made my life amazing, and I can't thank Silver and the rest of them enough. Live and love Alaska. Take chances, take risks, and just get out there and do it. That's my advice to you all. Thank you.
Brent Sass and Silver. Our next storyteller has arguably traveled more of the Arctic under his own power than anyone else in history. He's walked and skied 6,000 miles without support or sponsorship. Whenever he's tried to take people with him, people younger than himself, I'd like to add, they always have had to scratch due to injury or fatigue. A colleague of mine who's hiked with him says he doesn't even sit down to eat when he's hiking, which just boggles my mind because, that's half of why I eat during hiking is for the excuse to sit down. His book is called Canyons and Ice. We have copies available here tonight, and he'll be available after the show to sign them for you. And there's a link to his book on our website, darkwinternights.com, or it's canyonsandIce.com. Tonight we'll discuss his encounters with bears, rabid foxes, devastating frostbite, and more. Please welcome Dick Griffith. You stopped carrying a weapon as you traveled. Why did you stop carrying a rifle or a gun? You don't carry a weapon?
You know what? I went across the North Slope in the summertime. I carried a rifle because at that time that's the only way I knew how to eat was to shoot caribou. But I hate mosquitoes. There's lots of mosquitoes up there. So I started traveling in the wintertime. And I traveled I went from Bettles to Nenana, and I went from Bettles to Allakaket to Tanana, went over the Ray Mountains, and eventually worked my way down to Unalakleet. And when I was 63 years, I retired on a Friday, and I was 63 years old, and I decided to ski from Unalakleet to Barrow, which is 900 miles. And I actually made it in 63 days. And, of course, there's polar bears. You're supposed to be worried about polar bears and wolves and all this stuff. And polar bears are nothing.
I feel the same way. They're totally overrated.
But the fox is so horrible. When I was out there, 40% of them were rabid. And just before I got to Kivalina, it was early in the morning, I saw this shadow next to me. And he grabbed my leg, the shadow did. That's all I saw. And I was in my sled and a harness, and so I reached back and I tried to stab the rough fox with my pole, and I missed him, and I fell down on the slick ice, and I was tied to my skis and tied to the sled. And the fox got me. He got me again on the glove. He got me on the chest, and of course I knew immediately I was rabid. There was no way, because he did a number on me. And but I noticed that it didn't break any skin, but I was still rabid. And so I said, I got to get the Kivalina. And I need help. And so it was a shortcut. There was some soft ice out there, and all I had to do was cut across this soft ice, and I'd get to Kivalina quick. And I got out there about a quarter of a mile. I fell into the ocean. I dropped through the ice, and it's really not a big deal. You just break the ice off, and you climb back up. And it was
simple,
10 below.
Really. When you think about it.
It wasn't really cold.
The ocean, the frozen ocean, just so I want to clarify, the frozen ocean wasn't really that cold?
It's what?
The ice under the water under the ice wasn't that cold?
No, because it just froze. It's what you call new ice. There's fast ice and there's new ice. When you travel in the ocean, you got these terms that goes with it. There's pressure ridges and tide cracks, and it's all kinds of garbage out there. But I fell in and I got out, and of course I was froze immediately like a popsicle, but it's nothing really. You just get in your tent and you start your little stove up, and you heat up some boiling water and a halogen bottle, and you thaw out your clothes, and that's it. And when I got to Kivalina, I told the natives, I says, I'm rabid. And they laughed at me. They looked at my little mark on my leg, and I said, that's nothing. The kids get bit all the time just going to school. Yeah. And so I said, gee, yeah, But my problem was I told people in Anchorage. And you never tell people in Anchorage, I come from Anchorage. Don't tell them anything. Yeah. But the doctors wanted me to come back and be a man and get my, the long shots, whatever they are. And I kept on going. I got up to Point Hope, and I went past Point Hope. And so the natives thought I was kind of incompetent. They figured that I wasn't rabid, but I was a white man. I didn't know anything. And so they thought I'd went out on the ice, because the ice goes back and forth, it goes back in the ocean and it runs back up on shore and it goes back out. I always stay on the ice because that's the best place to camp, because there's shelter. So from Barrow, they sent a helicopter down to pick me up. And the helicopter couldn't find me. They come 300 miles. So the next day they sent 2 airplanes to find me, and they finally found me. So this rabies thing went on and on forever, but I didn't go back and get my shot, so I just toughed it out. And you said something about guns, right?
Well, I just want to say, with perseverance, you too can conquer rabies. It's really just sissies. You die in 72 hours. You wrote in your diary that you almost wished that you did have rabies on this trip so you could back out of the trip gracefully. And my question is, gracefully for who? Who are you worried about impressing at this point? Who are you worried about? You said you wanted to back out gracefully.
Well, I wanted to get out of this. I was suffering up there because I still didn't know how to travel in the Arctic. Because I had a little gasoline stove was worthless, and I had a frozen sleeping bag, and I just wanted that was a graceful way to abandon the trip at Point Lay or Wainwright and get the hell out of there because things were tough up there. But I just kept on going. I kept on going. The barrel made it anyway.
Who are you trying to impress with all this is my ultimate question.
I wasn't trying to impress anybody. I just, there was a lot of stuff I did that was really more impressive than this, but we'll not go over that tonight.
Are you talking about this right now?
Yeah.
Or, oh.
Yeah.
I won't take that personally. Maybe Silver has rabies. We could get Silver to bite you. In all these travels, Dick, have you learned anything about life and what it means to be human and spending all this time by yourself out in the wilderness?
Why do I...
In all this time that you spent traveling by yourself in the wilderness, you have a lot of time to yourself. Have you learned anything about what it means to be human, to be the human existence?
I didn't learn anything.
Dick Griffith, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks so much for coming to our biggest Dark Winter Nights live event yet. The goal of Dark Winter Nights is to share true stories from Alaska with the rest of the world, and your support is helping us to do that. Before we go tonight, would you please join us in singing the Alaska Flag Song led by Emily Anderson? I love this song. I think it's a great way to end a night of celebrating Alaska. The words are on the back of your programs.